But this party has a manifesto which far exceeds any other.
What the Hezbollah would like to do is to create an Islamic state in Lebanon, a state ruled by Islamic law. This means that the Christian communities, who up to now have, if you will, been partners in Lebanon with the Muslims, wary partners from time to time, but nonetheless partners, these communities of Christians would become subordinate to a Muslim government, an Islamic government, which would be created after the model of the Islamic Republic of Iran. For Hezbollah, the West and Israel, the United States and Israel in particular, are viewed as absolute evils. Israel is to be eliminated. Jerusalem is to be regained, and Islam is to reign over the land of Palestine.
Every Friday, the Hezbollah faithful flock to this mosque in the Beirut suburb of Bir Abid. They have come to hear one man. Sheikh Mohammed Hussein Fadlallah is the spiritual leader of Hezbollah, an organization with massive Iranian funding to wage all-out war on Israel and the West. Within its ranks, small bands of fanatics operate under a bewildering succession of names. They currently hold over 20 Westerners hostage, including Terry Waite. Attended by armed bodyguards, Fadlallah preaches an uncompromising message about the West.
والكلمات التي تتحدث عن الإنسانية وعن حقوق الإنسان وعن كل ذلك، ولكن السلام سلامهم لا سلامنا، الحضارة حضارتهم لا حضارتنا، الرخاء رخاؤهم لا رخاؤنا، الأمن أمنهم لا أمننا، حقوق الإنسان لمصلحتهم لا لمصلحتنا، يوحي بعضهم إلى بعض زخرف القول غرورا، يوحون ذلك في الإذاعات والصحف والتلفزيون وفي النوادي الدولية وفي كل ذلك حتى يثيروا المسألة ضدك كيفما شاءوا، ولو شاء الله.
Fadlallah, like his mentor, Khomeini, urged on these warriors of Islam to defeat and humiliate the great Satan.
You're right or you're wrong. I don't care as long as you sound off. You're right! God damn it!
They didn't have far to look for their target.
GI beans and GI gravy! GI beans and GI gravy! GI wings are join the Navy!
500 U.S. Marines were in Lebanon, part of the multinational force that had been sent in to keep the peace.
The United States had a well-intended idea that it was possible to save Lebanon. But after years of violence, after years of bloodletting, it was possible to return the state to a state of civility, to a normal environment. I think there was an element of naivete. The United States was very much seen by many of the people in Lebanon as an enemy because it was seen as a supporter of the Israeli invasion of 1982, and as an enemy because through its participation in the multinational force, it was not seen as taking a neutral role, but, if you will, as simply becoming another militia in a complicated civil war.
Hezbollah struck. A truck loaded with a ton of TNT ripped the Marine barracks apart. Hezbollah had gained one martyr. The Americans had lost 240 dead. They'd not seen such carnage since Vietnam. Sheikh Fadlallah, for one, thought such tactics justified.
لا تستطيع أن تقول للإنسان الذي تغرس السكين في ظهره أن يتحدث عن حقوق الإنسان. ولكن الظروف الأمنية والضغوط الصعبة هي التي قد تؤدي إلى العنف تماما كما كانت الغرب في الحرب العالمية الثانية أمام احتلال النازي لبريطانيا أو لفرنسا أو لغيرهما من الدول، فإن الغرب قد استعمل أقصى درجات العنف لا سيما في إلقاء القنبلة الذرية على هيروشيما.
The tactics of terror indeed went both ways. A massive car bomb exploded outside Fadlallah's apartment. He was out and survived. Many did not. "80 people were killed. More than 200 were injured, even by Beirut standards. It was horrific." It was impossible to prove who had planted the bomb, but Fadlallah had no doubts.
نحن قلنا أن وراءها المخابرات الأمريكية التي تعاونت مع المخابرات اللبنانية والمخابرات الإسرائيلية، وقد اعترفت أجهزة الإعلام الأمريكية فيما نشرته الواشنطن بوست بأن هذه العملية كانت موجهة ضدي لأجل اغتيالي من قبل المخابرات الأمريكية.
The Americans had come to keep the peace. It seemed there was no longer any peace to keep. The Marines cut their losses. With a handful of martyrs, Hezbollah had inflicted a humiliating defeat on a world superpower. Hezbollah is the most dynamic and ruthless force in Lebanon. Its relentless message of no compromise with Israel and the West is consumed avidly by the young. Hezbollah's fanatical appeal is in the hands of hardline sheikhs like Omar Obeid. At a mosque only a mile from the Israeli front line, he exhorts young followers to fight and kill the enemies of Islam.
لا يفكر المقاتل بمسألة النصر أو بمسألة كم سيربح، يفكر المقاتل بأنني أنا منطلق للشهادة. وبالطبع عندنا إذا كان هذا انطلق للشهادة من طلق الدنيا سخرت له. غالبا المجاهد ينطلق بحالة بكاء وحالة روحية عظيمة بعد الدعاء وقراءة القرآن وغيرها. فهذا إذا لما يصل إلى خاصة العدو يصرخ وجهه بصرخات الله أكبر، فهذه تؤثر في ذات العدو تأثيرا جيدا.
The day after that interview, Ubaid's fighters, blessed by him, attacked a key Israeli position, a hilltop fort. Confident of success, or at least their place in paradise, the attack was filmed by Hezbollah. It's a unique glimpse of the realities of guerrilla warfare.
بلش
A captured tank. Israeli gunships circle threateningly. Another captured armored car is driven off by Hezbollah. 7 enemy soldiers have been killed. It was this defeat in particular that caused Israel to threaten a new invasion of Lebanon. With a seemingly endless supply of martyrs, Hezbollah's leaders now look beyond the borders of Lebanon.
احنا بنريد لبنان او بالاحرى بنريد العالم العادل مش لبنان. حزب الله، فكرة حزب الله ما بفهم لبنان. بفهمش ارض، بفهمش حدود صغيرة او كبيرة. لا يتصور واحد انه والله حزب الله بده جمهورية اسلامية في لبنان، وهذا هو السؤال المقصود يعني. جمهورية اسلامية او غير جمهورية اسلامية. نحن نعتقد كما قلت اول كلام بان بجمهورية العالم قائدها صاحب الزمن الذي سيظهر، والآن نحن نهيئ دائما إلى أن تكون العالم كله في عدالة، مش لبنان بس.
The country which has most to fear from Hezbollah is Israel, a threat that they say is now greater than the PLO.
We have not seen by Palestinians so many terror acts that their execution from the very beginning, dependent on the knowledge of the terrorist that he has to commit suicide to carry his mission. The car bombs, the truck bombs, this kind of terror acts has not been carried at all by any one of the Palestinian terrorists.
Why do you think the Shia then do it?
Might be related to their more deep, fanatic, fundamentalistic religion perception. The whole Shiite, from the school of the fundamentalistic attitude of Khomeini, are ready to do things that normally others, Muslims, don't carry out.
Why does our government increase our suffering by ignoring us? I thought that Americans were to be protected by the government.
But equally, Westerners, and particularly Americans, it seems, must be prepared to suffer and die for their support of Israel.
And there is no end in sight for our situation.
A new and sinister campaign began. This time, individuals, often people who had lived in Lebanon for years, suddenly became targets.
My wife, Elaine, my children.
In its various guises, Hezbollah have kidnapped and killed indiscriminately.
And to let them know that I'm well.
The Reverend Ben Weir had worked for charities in Beirut for 20 years. It didn't matter. Ultimately, it wasn't who you were, but what you were.
I was simply an American on the street that day, and my captors wanted an American.
He has pulled a hand grenade pin, and he is ready to blow up the aircraft if he has to. We must, I repeat, we must land at Beirut. We must land at Beirut. No alternative.
On the 14th of June 1985, Hezbollah pulled off their most spectacular operation, the hijacking of TWA Flight 847. Once again, out of the 153 passengers and crew aboard, it was Americans who were singled out to die.
We came into Beirut and we heard a shot up front in the airplane. And then after landing, the hijackers came dancing through the aisle as if they were celebrating. and they had just killed an American passenger.
We consider these murders, hijackings, and abductions an attack on all Western civilization by uncivilized barbarians.
The potential for conflict between the West and Islam has never been greater. The danger increases almost by the hour. Both sides have psyched themselves into polarized positions. Many Americans literally believe that a Muslim fundamentalist is automatically a terrorist. And many Muslim fundamentalists truly believe that the U.S. is the great Satan, trying to defeat Islam.
Every time the word Islam is mentioned, the West is completely alarmed and furious.
The Americans would say that they're on the sharp end of a certain brand of Islam, an Islam which blows up their Marines, which attacks their...
Oh, come on.
Which blows up airplanes.
Who did Hiroshima? Who did the Second World War? Who did the First World War? Who is having the atomic bomb? Who is killing everybody everywhere? Us or the West and the top of America? America is leading the movement of terrorism all over the whole world. And I can see them as vampires. If they can see us as terrorists, I see them as vampires. They are not human anymore.
The Quran promises the Muslim, or at least the good Muslim, a future paradise. A place where the desert wastes have been turned into a land of flowing waters and green trees. A land of pleasure and leisure. The present life for most is very different. A third world where poverty, death, and disease are routine. They compare their poverty with the wealth of the West. A West, they are told, that exploits them and keeps them poor through crippling debts. A West that, in contrast, nourishes the one nation that these zealots see as their greatest enemy. As a result, many feel the West should pay a price.
We have to recognize that acts that Israel engages in oftentimes taint us. Let me give you a very simple example. When I was on the ground in Lebanon, I lived in South Lebanon for about 14 months. I was bombed by the Israeli Air Force on a number of occasions. I wasn't bombed as a target, but I happened to be in a target area. When one sees an American plane bombing, it may have Israeli markings on it, but when the bomb is falling on your head, you tend to see an American plane, Israeli Air Force or not. So in short, we tend to be painted, if you will, with the same brush that the Muslims paint Israel with, and that's quite a problem. Also, we need to recognize that the demands of many of these groups, demands for social justice and so on, are demands which we can stand behind, which we can support.
The West is trying desperately to protect itself against the wrath of militant Islam, but its response has been confused and ambiguous. It threatens massive military retaliation, often against groups it cannot identify, then does deals with them, the release of its hostages. The West cannot make its mind up.
I think that they need to understand that not any one country, but all of the Western nations in particular, if anyone, say, kidnaps Americans, kidnaps Europeans, blows up places, public places, conveyances, meeting establishments, when we find them, we're going to deal with them, and we'll deal with them very harshly. They had to include capital punishment. If they kill, give them a little Islamic justice back.
A military response is not going to work. You kill one Muslim fundamentalist or extremist, and two will appear in his place. Economic sanctions will not be an effective way because, first of all, you're not dealing with necessarily just governments. This movement now spreads beyond borders into a wide area. Also, these people are prepared to endure enormous hardship. At the end of the day, the only way to engage or respond to Islamic fundamentalism is for the U.S. and the West in general to try to engage in rapprochement. The U.S. must recognize that Islam is an ideological force and a power that cannot be defeated militarily. It is here to stay well into the next century.
Islam is the world's fastest growing religion. 5 times a day, 900 million people bow down towards this holy stone and pray. Soon, 1/4 of the people on this planet will be Muslim. Like all major world religions, Islam preaches equality and justice. The growing Muslim world sees little of both. Their faith is often born out of despair. For many, it is turning to anger. For some, the word of Islam is being replaced by the sword.